So you've clicked on this video because you're wondering, how do I sell my condo fast in the 2023 Chicago real estate market? Well, the answer is to have an agent that consumes a ton of Smart Food popcorn. Now, all jokes aside, even though this is the best snack on earth, and I do eat a ton of it because it's here at our office, that is not the only way to sell your property. So what we're gonna talk about on this video is how you can strategically and tactfully sell your property fast in the Chicago real estate market in 2023. And this is in partnership with a real estate agent, somebody like myself. But a lot of sellers are out there, they're wondering, what do we do? We have a low interest rate, but we need to sell because we're outgrowing our space, or maybe we're relocating to a different city, or various other reasons why people buy and sell properties. So if you find yourself in a position where you need to sell your property in 2023, well, listen up to this video, because we're gonna be diving into 5 or 6 different ways and strategies and kind of ways to think about the listing process so that you can maximize the sale of your home in the quickest period of time. Welcome back to another video. My name is Jordan Pyle, and I am your go-to Chicago real estate agent. Been servicing the city of Chicago for the last 10 years. My team and I would be honored to help you achieve your real estate goals. So if you're moving to Chicago, or you have a place to sell here in Chicago and you're looking to buy something else, feel free to just text the number on the screen. That'll come directly into me, and my team and I would be honored for the opportunity to support you. Other than that, check out some of the free resources down in the description. Like this video, comment any other questions you have, and definitely be sure to smash the subscribe button, because we all know the YouTube algorithm loves that. So without further ado, let's jump on in. So usually the way this process starts is that I get referred to somebody that's thinking about selling their property. They're a current homeowner, and for various different reasons, they've decided that 2023 is the year they need to put their property on the market, and they want to get it sold. And they want to get it sold fast, and they want to also maximize the amount that they can take from the sale proceeds. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the different steps involved in selling your property, and some of the different ways I look at this process so that we can position your property in the market in the best way possible. So usually how this process starts is I get a phone call, ring ring. This is Joe and Susie. We were referred to you by XYZ couple, and we heard you did a great job selling their property and helping them buy another one. So we wanted to reach out to you to talk a little bit more about what we need to do to sell ours. So that's typically how that first conversation goes, right? So the seller is very much an information gathering stage, but they've determined that they want to sell their property, or you have determined at this point that you want to sell your property, and now you just need to know how, right? What are the best approaches? What is the 1, 2, 3, 4 step process that's gonna get you results? And so from that very first phone call, typically what I do is I say, hey, let's set up a time for me to come by, meet you, tour your property, understand more what's valuable to you in the sale of this property, and why you're most motivated to sell it. This will be a really good opportunity for us to get on the same page, make sure we have rapport with each other, make sure that the value that I bring as your realtor to the equation and to the transaction is one that you feel confident and clear about, so that you can move forward with that confidence and clarity to know that your property is being handled, and it's being marketed, and it's being sold in the best way possible. There's really only 3 things, or really it's a combination of these 3 things, that will lead you to results when you're selling your property. Number 1 is price, number 2 is condition, and number 3 is exposure, aka marketing. Those are the 3 prongs of the stool that you need in order to be successful at selling your home. And it's important to know that you cannot have 1 or 2 without the 3rd, because all 3 of them lean on each other to make sure that your selling strategy and the overall outlook of the strategy is the right one. So let's say you have a 2-bed, 2-bath property in Lincoln Park here in Chicago, and we think the value of that property is right around $700,000. So the way that that property is going to stack up in the market is it's going to be on the higher end of the 2-bed, 2-baths in Lincoln Park market. Right? So in order to be able to command a high price as it relates to the rest of the homes, you need to make sure that your price is right as it relates to condition and exposure. And so what I mean by this is, if your property, even though it's in a good location, you have an agent that knows how to market your property appropriately in order to expose it to the widest pool of buyers as possible, if you miss the mark and you price it way over what the actual fair market value is, you're not going to achieve the results that you're looking for. So it has to be a combination of price, condition, and exposure, and really it's the condition and the exposure as well as the location that determines what the price is. And just because we decide that our strategy for listing puts us at a list price of X, usually what I want to understand with my sellers is what is a win, or what is an absolute home run, best case scenario if all things were to come true, what is their ideal situation for selling this property in terms of how quickly they sell this property, and as well as what price point and the amount of net proceeds that they walk from the closing table with this property. So I just want to kind of explain that really quickly so you understand how all three of these factors work together to make sure our strategy is the right one. So a couple questions that I'm going to ask after we finish the tour and ask you about different updates and improvements that you've made in the property is I'm going to ask you, most importantly, in a perfect world again, I like to frame a lot of these questions in a perfect world blank, because I think that tells you the true motivations and really what would make you feel awesome at the end of the sale. And I want to talk about timing being first, because oftentimes our strategy is going to be dependent on your timing. So if you're not looking to close, and in a perfect world you're not closing in 4 months, well, it may not make sense to list your property today, because we may get ready, willing, and able buyers that are in the market today, and that a 4-month out closing just doesn't work for them. So we really want to make sure that we're backtracking. So normally someone says to me, let's just use the example, hey Jordan, we want to make sure that we are closing no later than July 1, 2023. So I'm gonna say, okay, based on July 1, let's work backwards to make sure we know exactly when we need to list your property on the market to get it closed prior to that deadline. And so if you're a July 1 closing date at the very latest, we wanna make sure that we're giving ourselves about 60 days from the time somebody goes under contract on that property to the time that they close on that property. So if we extrapolate that backwards, so July 1, we're talking June 1, we're talking May 1 is when we need to be going under contract. So now May 1 is our under contract target date. But in order to go under contract by May 1, we probably need to give ourselves 2 to 4 weeks conservatively from the time we list that property until the time we get a contract on that property. And here's a quick disclaimer is that I will always put a strategy forward for my sellers that causes us to get an offer within the first 2 weeks. That is always the goal, and if not in the first 2 weeks, at least in the first 30 days. So there's no point of listing a property if we're like, hey, well, let's give ourselves 45 to 60 days to actually get an offer and go under contract on that property. My strategy will never be that. If I'm working with you, my strategy is, okay, let's price it either right at fair market value or even slightly under fair market value so that we can elicit a quick sale on the property. And if we do our job right, within 2 weeks, if not 30 days, your property is under contract. So again, July 1 closing date, June 1, May 1, that's our target under contract date. So then if it's May 1 target under contract, we need to list your property probably by April 1st or April 15th at the latest. So now we know, okay, 90 days prior to the date that you want to be closed and receive your net proceeds on this property, we're actually going live on the market. And the reason this is important is because we don't just go live the day you tell us you're ready. We need to now take that day that we want to go live, and we need to work backward from there once again. Because we need to know, okay, do we need to get stagers in there? Do we need to do any work to the property such as paint or declutter? Once we actually have the place in photo ready condition, which is what I typically require, that is gonna take us about 48 hours after photo day in order to get those photos back. And then once we have those photos back, we wanna have about 3 to 5 business days to market your property with all of the full marketing collateral as a pocket listing prior to actually formally listing it on the market. So again, if you're thinking about July 1, we wanna go 90 days before that in terms of our target list date. And then we wanna go about a week and a half prior to that by the time that we wanna be in photo ready condition. That, from my end of things, is really what I'm waiting for. Is I'm waiting for my clients, and I'm providing them resources if they need a good painter, if they need someone to declutter, if they need to find a storage pod or something else that they need to do to get their property in photo ready condition. I'm helping them and giving them those resources ahead of time. But really what I'm most focused about, because I need to align my troops and all of my different vendors, such as my photographer, my videographer, my transaction manager, and making sure that my schedule also aligns, we need to have this about a week and a half prior to being in photo ready condition. So all those things said, I just need to know when you're gonna have the property ready for me to bring in my videographer and for me to bring in my photographer. And what I say from that point forward is to do your best at keeping it in that photo ready condition all the way through those first 2 weeks on the market. Because the less that we have to move things around or maneuver certain things, if you can just keep it in that photo ready condition, it's going to save you a ton of headaches, and it's going to make the property show the absolute best. All right, so that was a little bit of a tangent on timeline. However, that is a really important thing. We spend a lot of time on that up front because the way that we price the property and the way that we expose that property to the buyer pool is all going to be dependent on when we are trying to get that property closed. So now that we move away from timeline, let's talk about condition. Condition is the next thing. So sometimes I walk into a home and the property is already in what I like to call photo ready condition. However, other times I walk in and it looks like a hoarder has been there. And so I'm gonna see different people at different places along this journey, and my job is to help you get the property into photo ready condition. So condition is so key though, because the modern buyer, they want move-in ready, they want turnkey. As much as people out there say that they want a fixer-upper, they've been watching HTV, they've been watching Property Brothers, Chip Joanna Gaines, most people, when it comes down to it, they'd rather buy the property that's already been fixed up versus them having to do it after the fact. That's just the modern day home buyer, and that's not all home buyers, but on average, I would say that we want to get the property in its best shape possible so that later on, a buyer doesn't come in and try to negotiate large inspection credits because of some of the updates and the improvements that they need to make for that property after they actually go under contract and purchase it. The most common things that I see are minor improvements and upgrades such as painting, maybe there's a new countertop, maybe we're installing some different light fixtures, changing out the can lights so that they're more of a white light versus a yellow light. There's a lot of different tips and tricks that I'll walk you through as we're actually in your property on the day of that listing presentation. So you're gonna walk away with a list of items that you need to do and different types of people that you may need resources from me for in order for us to get this property in photo ready condition. So now that we understand what our condition is gonna be like and we understand your timeline, now we can start to dip our toe into price and then ultimately how we're going to achieve that through marketing, AKA the third leg, which is the exposure. So let's just go into price really quickly. Pricing is so critical in today's current market. You don't wanna miss high. And what I mean by this is we are currently in a seller's market. So we're in a market right now where there's no inventory, AKA there's no supply, and there's an influx or there's more demand outpacing the amount of new homes coming to the market. So this creates a seller's market. And the seller's market is pretty much anywhere under 4 months of inventory. So anywhere between 0 days and about 3.5 to 4 months of inventory is considered a seller's market where there's more demand than there is supply. We've been in a seller's market here in Chicago and pretty much nationwide for the last 7 or 8 years, and an extreme seller's market in the last 2 to 3. So when we're in a seller's market, the best thing that we can do is to price ahead of the market. This goes back to what I was saying earlier in the video, is we don't want to price it even just slightly too high and then bake in a little bit of room to negotiate. And I get it, as a seller, that's something that you may want to do. You're like, okay, well, if I want to sell my property for $700,000, maybe I should be at $715,000 so that when a buyer offers, we have 15 grand to negotiate so that we land at $700,000. I would say I get that line of thinking, it makes complete sense, but it doesn't work in a seller's market. Because what happens, and I'm gonna draw this curve, right? So this curve coming down, think of this as a roller coaster, and I've probably pointed this out in other videos before, but we're in a shifting market, right? So this is basically home values coming over the top. This is the amount of contracts coming together. This is the amount of closings that are happening. All of these carts are falling, and typically the last cart to come over the top is your home values. And we right now are in a market where if it's a shifting and it's falling, which over time it's going to, even though right now we're kind of in this like artificial market where home values continue to increase. On a macro level, we're probably gonna see home values decrease over the next 2 or 3 years. So if you price right here just slightly too high, and this last cart, which is home prices, is coming over the top, you're missing the market. You have a gap between where you're priced and where the market is. Versus if you price it maybe even slightly low or right at fair market value, the coaster is going to come down and it's going to meet you at your price right here. So now you're meeting the market versus pricing too high and then having to play catch up and you're chasing the market. The biggest mistake you can make right now is to price your property too high. So if you have an agent that's telling you, hey, even though I think that's too high, I'm going to agree with it. Let's price it where you want to price it. I would say to run for the hills. You don't want an agent that's going to listen to what you have to say. Of course, they're going to take everything you have to say into consideration, your opinions, your values, but you're also hiring a real estate agent and a listing agent because it's their job and it's their profession to help you sell that property. They are the expert. And a lot of times if somebody's not listening to my expert opinion of 10 years in this business, then maybe they're not a very serious seller, or there's gonna be a lot of tension later on down the road. So I'd rather just tell people up front what they need to hear versus what they wanna hear. And a lot of times this comes into play when we're talking about pricing and pricing ahead of the market versus missing the market by pricing too high. The other thing I wanna say on pricing is we wanna take into consideration pricing parameters. So when people search for properties online, 99.9% of people are starting their home searches online now. They're usually starting their search and they're defining their search in $25,000 increments, right? So let's just say somebody is looking for a home between 650 and 700,000, they're probably doing their search from like 600,000 to like 725. They're going to give themselves a little bit of room on the end in order to negotiate down if they feel like that's possible. Or maybe they're even drawing their search a little bit short because they know that it's a competitive market and they may need to pay over asking price. But the point is typically there's not like a $10,000 or $15,000 jump. Usually if there's a jump or a change in parameters, it's going to be $25,000. So if we're right on a threshold number, let's just say it's like a round number like $700,000, we most likely want to list it at $700,000 versus, let's just say, $699,900. And even though that's just a $1 difference, what $700,000 allows us to do is it allows us to straddle the market. So now we get everyone, for example, that's looking from $600,000 all the way up to $700,000 as their cap, and this is the most expensive home in their search. Or we're looking for anyone that has a search and parameters set up from $700,000 up to $800,000, and this is the cheapest option in their search. So it's very important when you're on those whole numbers to make sure that you're pricing it effectively and that you have the right strategy, because you could miss literally half the market just by pricing $1 too much. So to round that all out, it's critically important to price your property right in today's market. Trust that pricing it low and creating a bidding war or creating like a fear of loss equation is going to always be a better approach than just pricing it too high. So the whole goal here is that we're pricing it in the market so that we get as much traffic through your unit as possible, so that we create this fear of loss equation, and ultimately we end up with multiple offers, increasing your chances of actually ending up with more than what you're listing the property for. So the moral of this whole story on price is that you want to miss low versus missing too high, because if you miss low, the market's naturally going to drive the property towards its fair market value, versus if you list too high, you could end up a stale listing and chasing the market down, ultimately netting you less than what you would have netted if you would have just priced it in the market or even slightly ahead of the market. So that rounds out pricing. We talked about condition. Now we're going to talk about exposure in the last couple minutes of this video, and exposure is marketing. And I think the best agents out there that are getting the best results for their clients, they're combining old school approaches with the new school or modern age approaches. So the old school are things such as your open house. This is things like flyers. This is cold calling the neighborhood. This is picking up the phone and calling other agents that may have buyers that are wanting to show that property. And then on the other side, the modern side, is putting the video up on YouTube like I'm doing right here and getting exposure for people that might be moving into Chicago. The other thing is putting out social media posts to make sure that different people in your network are seeing this property, so that if they're looking for the home. But really the thing that I zone in the most on, and the thing where I say I have a competitive advantage, is most of the time, like 90% of the time, the buyer for that property that you're getting ready to sell is going to be coming from an agent who is representing that buyer. And the thing about me and the thing about a lot of other good agents out there is we're very involved. We have a reputation in our local market and in the National Association of Realtors. So when we have a listing that's getting ready to go to market, or we have buyers that are looking for certain types of properties, we have the competitive edge because we have more exposure to more of the agents that are representing the buyers that are gonna buy your property. So a couple of different ways to reach these people is, surprisingly enough, everyone that follows me on social media, such as Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all these different accounts, they are mainly realtors or other people in the real estate business. So when I post an Instagram reel or a story saying, hey, coming soon in Lincoln Park, a lot of these realtors are gonna be seeing this, and they're gonna see it, and they know that they're working with a buyer that's looking for something like that. And because there's no inventory, they're looking for off-market opportunities to take to their buyer so that they look like the hero. So my job as your realtor is to use digital modern approaches such as email newsletters, Instagram, social media, short form content, and long form content, as well as just leveraging different groups such as Facebook groups maybe for the area, or different broker communities such as Top Agent Network and the Private Network, to make sure that as many agents are seeing your property as possible, as well as the public market. But as soon as you list that property on the MLS and it goes live, you're now exposing it to the public and anyone else that's out there that has Redfin or Zillow on their phone and they're scrolling at night looking for properties. Really, my job is to bring you a buyer before we go to market, and if not right before we go to market, soon thereafter in that first couple weeks of listing the property. So that kind of rounds out a few of the details about how to sell your home fast in today's Chicago real estate market in 2023. So to recap really quickly is you want to make sure your price is dialed in, you're pricing ahead of the market, so either right at fair market value or slightly under. Your condition is as much move-in ready or turnkey as possible. and that your exposure, aka your marketing, is that you're hiring an agent that knows how to utilize old school marketing approaches as well as modern day new school approaches. If you can get an agent that can touch all three of these categories and provide a solution and an actual strategy around how they're going to position your specific property to sell in today's current real estate market, then you may have a winning agent and a winning selling strategy on your hands. So if this has been valuable or helpful in any way, you're thinking about selling your property, again, feel free to reach out to the number on the screen here. That'll come directly to me. We'll get in touch with you and talk about how we can make your home selling journey a success. Or if you're moving to Chicago or from anywhere else, or you just have general questions about the Chicago real estate market, feel free to reach out. And without further ado, if this has been helpful, please do us a favor, like, comment, and subscribe so you can catch all of our future videos. All right, peace.